Welcome to Camp Constitution Radio with your host, Hal Shurtleff. The show is heard on WBCQ The Planet every Monday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can also pick it up on IPMNation.org Saturday afternoons at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And on Podomatic, you can get not all of the shows, but some of the shows. Podomatic is put in Camp Constitution Radio, and it should come up to my, or you can go to the Camp Constitution website, campconstitution.net, and you'll see, I just dropped down a little bit on the homepage, and you will see a link to Podomatic and some other things, too. Of course, it's also heard on YouTube. We take the video of the audio and convert it to a YouTube video, and a few on Vimeo, but Podomatic is something that we just signed up for very recently, last couple of weeks, and it lists the different the standings of we're listed as conservative talk right, and under that category today we were 8th place, which it's not too bad. Although it's not like we're getting hundreds of thousands of people, but it's another way to get the message out. We'd be getting some downloads of some of our programs, and some of the ones I think that are more important, more topical. I've interviewed some really fascinating people over the last few years, and some of those are available on the Podomatic. And so please, if you're listening to this show, go to our website, campconstitution.net, and, visit our Podomatic channel, visit our YouTube channel. I'm very pleased that we're getting over 1,000 views a day. Now, of course, in the eyes of people like Mark Dice and Alex Jones and some of these bigger outlets, that's a drop in the bucket, but it's still a drop, and that drop's getting bigger all the time. And I think we have a lot of things on our YouTube channel that are yet to be discovered by the by the general audience. We do have a lot of folks watching the Willie Soon presentation. The first class he gave at camp this past July, close to 40,000 views, and I think that's pretty substantial. So, but there's a lot of other good things on there over the years, and even more recently. And during the course of the year, I stop off at various places. We do we have some classic information up there. I just put up a documentary on the story of the gun inventor John Browning. We do a history where we'll stop off at a historical place and do a little documentary. I did one on General John Stark, and just yesterday I visited the Historical Society in Brooklyn, Connecticut, and did one on Israel Putnam. I haven't put it up yet, but it'll be up there in a couple of days. So please avail yourself. And also, this show does cost some money, and it costs money to keep me out in the field and the things that we do. So please consider donating, and you can do that via our website through PayPal. $5 a month, one-time donation. You want to be a sponsor. If you have a business or a nonprofit, for $100 a year, we put you on your sponsors page, and that could be construed as a legitimate tax write-off since it's an advertisement. So anyway,
hi, Hal.
Hey, Tom Moore on the line. How you doing there, brother Tom? My co-host. Well,
I'm well. I'm well, Hal. And Hal, by the way, a very happy Bill of Rights Day to you.
Well, I know that's right, because you sent me an email this morning. Usually you're sort of a night owl, so I said, "What's he doing up at 9 o'clock?" So I figured, hey, maybe I have him on the show. But before, I want to get into the Bill of Rights a little bit. It's a topic that we've covered a whole lot, but I want to discuss some of the social issues that are coming up. Of course, Columbus Day is coming up in a few weeks, and yesterday I had the privilege of being on the Lori on Liberty show down in because I'm in Boston, but on New London, Connecticut. And if you she has a website. I think it's called Liberty. No, I'll get it to you. If not, I'll put it in the link to the page here. But Lori is a good friend. And she wanted me on to talk about the flag issue, which I've discussed on the last show, but also to talk about the cultural Marxism and the taking down statues, not just of Confederates, if you live in a southern state, but statues of Washington and Christopher Columbus and others. By the way, Lori's website, she has a blog. It's called American Liberty Center, and she wrote a wonderful blog called Columbus, the Christ Bearer. That's what Christopher means, in the United Nations Global New World Order. So it's not that I'm an expert on Christopher Columbus, but one of the books that I strongly recommend to the listeners is a book by John Eidsmoe, who, by the way, is a Protestant. He is a Lutheran. He's a patriot. He's a colonel in the military, and a Christian man. He did an incredible series on the Constitution, which he did about, I think it was in the mid-'90s. But John Eisenmull wrote a book. It was called Columbus and Cortez, Conquerors for Christ. And he wrote this in 1992. Of course, that was the, 300th anniversary? Was it 400?
400.
400. Thank you. My Common Core math of the landing of Christopher Columbus. But some of the myths I think were generated, Tom, by people who just don't like Catholics. The idea that the world was flat, that was not shared by too many people. In fact, Christopher Columbus had access. He was a devout Christian. He knew the Bible, and he read the portion in Isaiah where Isaiah said that God sits above the circle of the earth. What Columbus believed was that the world was much smaller, and he had no idea that. And the reason why he had to look for another trade route is because of the Muslims' incursions. A lot of people don't realize what was going on in the world. That the Muslim nation, Muslimdom was advancing and taking off of lots of lands. They finally got rid of the Muslim influence in Spain and Portugal after several hundred years. So a lot of people don't understand that. And
I actually have one thing to thank the Muslims for right now in my morning coffee, and I know that the Muslims were stopped right outside Vienna in Europe, and when they defeated the Muslims, they found this black stuff, and the Viennese to this day are known to brew the best coffee in Europe.
Right.
So,
that's right. Yeah.
And that's one thing. Being in Boston, somebody told me, why do Americans drink tea and not coffee? Well, we dumped 93 or about 95,000 pounds of it in the harbor, so there wasn't any tea left. But the fish tasted like tea for years and years. Getting back to the Muslims, yes, that was a menace for Europe. They got coffee out of the deal, but wow, what a cost for that coffee, huh?
It was. So I think people need to do a little. Just don't listen to the politically correct historians. And what we know about, it's not like nothing. There isn't anything new that's come out. Oh my goodness, we found a trunk somewhere. It says all these horrible things. Columbus, when he came, he made 4 trips here. It really made a big impact on the world. Of course, it was something that was just so ridiculously historic. Finding this continent. Now, he actually didn't come to what became the continental United States. He got as far as Cuba, but that led to other explorations. And yes, there were some excesses. I'm not going to deny that, but it wasn't necessarily due to Columbus's fault. What he found a group of people called the Caribs, and they were absolute cannibals. They would capture other tribes, members of other tribes, that especially boys. They would castrate them, fatten them up, and eat them. That's pretty horrendous. And these kinds of things, they put a stop to this. And
yes,
Columbus,
and I want to chime in here, Hal. I mean, people are going to say Columbus, white, Arawaks, those other tribes, brown, black, what have you. If you look, even in Europe, I'm part Irish, and if you look at what St. Patrick did, they say St. Patrick, threw the snakes out of Ireland. There were no snakes, but there were snake-worshipping druids.
That's
and you
right.
can better believe those druids were involved in human sacrifice, too. So wherever you have Christianity moving in, whether they're white, black, brown, or purple, you have these really strange occult rituals. In Hindu, Dr. Kishore from India, there was a practice up until a couple hundred years ago where in some places, if the husband was killed in battle, that the wife would be burnt.
Or actually, if the husband died, they would burn not just the wife, but pretty much the servants, the whole batch.
That's right. So what Christianity does in the face of these pagan faiths is to offer the love and power, truth, and love of Jesus Christ, which does not permit all of these barbaric things.
That's right. So, and as Lori was mentioning, and she said the Aztecs, and of course what the Aztecs did was so horrendous. They believed that you had to sacrifice people to keep the sun god placated, so that we wouldn't go dark. And they would sacrifice hundreds of thousands of people on these altars. They would rip up their hearts, but they were still alive, and then drink the blood. That's not exactly very, very pleasant. And if that's the kind of diversity and multicultural these people advocate, when you bring this up, though, these people who want to destroy the memories of, Christopher Columbus and others. But the bottom line here is that he who controls the past controls the future. That was an Orwellian concept. So that's what this is all about. It's not about a statue of a general that lived, 200 years ago. It's about destroying the culture. And they
right.
changed
And what you described there, Hal, is two polar opposites. We have, human sacrifice, which is the history of almost all pagan tribes, no matter where they are.
And there were white tribes that
and
were
then
pagans
today,
too.
on this day, we have Bill of Rights Day. So how do we get from barbaric human rights to this marvelous document that we have that we celebrate today, which is the Bill of Rights, and those are God-given rights. Those are Christian rights. So Christ is the way that we got from point A to point B, and it's important to always remember that.
Now, yesterday, before I say, I do like to catch a game once in a while. I like a baseball game. I like to follow the Red Sox. I go to a game maybe once a year. I like to visit a minor league park when my travels, if there's time permitting. I'm not a big football fan, but I root for the Patriots. To me, it's just a little diversion from a busy schedule, and I think it's important you have to do things like that. You can't just be on overdrive, fifth gear constantly. You got to have a little, I like to go to a museum. I know you do too. You need to smell the roses once in a while.
Right.
And it's just, but I'm not obsessed with it. It's not that. It's not life and death. And if the team I'm rooting for loses, I'll get over it. It's not. I'm not going to jump off the bridge, and I don't gamble, and I'm not into this fantasy football stuff. But yesterday, many of the NFL players around the country violated the rules of the NFL, and they knelt. Now, that had to do with their opposition to Trump. I think initially, it was last year, the football player from the Colin Kaepernick, who he's talking about Black Lives Matter, and he knelt, and of course they don't say that he's a big supporter of Marxism, and he's a big supporter of the Castro regime and so forth. That they don't tell you. Here's a man who lived was adopted by a white family. He really had a wonderful upbringing, a middle class upbringing. He wasn't wanting for food or affection, but he probably got out of college. He became a Marxist, maybe even in high school. And they say, well, you have a right to express your opinion. And I don't disagree with that. But he's there as an employee.
Yeah.
And just like if I got a job working for the local convenience store and I had a Trump, Make America Great, or I was vote for Bernie, the owner of that says, look, you can vote for anybody you want. I don't care. That's the way it should be. But not while you're on the clock. The minute you're out the door, you can put that hat back on and walk, but not here. This isn't a. No, some of the owners might say, "Hey, look, I'm a big Trump guy. You can wear anything," or that's their right.
Right.
But but that to me, there's a little pizza restaurant in Ringe, New Hampshire, where we sometimes go, and the guy has a big old Trump sign, and there's another one down the street from me. He's got a big Marty Walsh for mayor sign. I don't like Marty Walsh.
Right.
But, he's supporting him.
Well, Hal, let me add just a little bit of insight in that. I think, unfortunately, I don't think a lot of the generation of athletes there. Gosh, America has given them so much. My goodness, could they ever ask for more? I would love to make, in my lifetime what one of those guys makes in a year. That's not going to happen. But I think most of them have no political or patriotic convictions whatsoever.
They don't.
I think there's something a little more nefarious here. Now, I don't know if you caught this, but there was now they play one football game a year in London, England.
Yes, that's right.
And so the football game in England was very instructive. So yes, you had people. There they are, and they play the American anthem, and they take a kneel against America. These are all American football players, every one of them, right? Okay. So now they're in a foreign country. They play the English national anthem, God Save the Queen. To a man, Hal, they stood up and put their hand over their heart for God Save the Queen.
Yep,
they didn't just stand. They not only stood up to listen to it, which is appropriate, but you do not put your hand over your heart except for your own anthem. And
that's
so
right.
I have to say, as an observer, that this seems to me to be very choreographed. I don't think these men suddenly felt patriotic towards England. I think that they're under some kind of instruction. That's just my thought.
I don't disagree with that. And of course, the owner, was Roger Goodell. He kind of went along with it. Many of the owners of the teams and so forth. And maybe he'll die out, but there are a lot of people pretty upset about it. And I served in the military. I stand for the national anthem. I don't care who's president, whether you like Trump or not, you hate him, you love him, or you're neutral. You don't. Obama was president for 8 years. We stood through the national. We started meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance. Obama had nothing to do with that. I'm not going to let my dislike for Obama, my dislike for George W. or H.W. or Clinton stop that. And that's the bottom line here. And these sanctimonious players. Institutionalized racism and all this stuff. Well, you're doing pretty good for yourself, guys. You're pretty.
Right.
I mean, let's face it, it's hard to become a professional athlete. You don't just walk into it. Even you might be blessed with certain God-given talents. You still have to perfect those things, and you still have to make the team. You can run fast and jump high and catch. That doesn't make you an NFL player. So, to their credit, they have to work hard and make the team. I don't begrudge them the money they make. They're doing something. I mean, a surgeon has to go to school and college for years.
But by comparison, to give a little bit of perspective, there's a new book about Ty Cobb, who was very beloved, and he wasn't a spiker. He didn't spike people. There's a lot of myths about him. Ty Cobb was a patriot. Ty Cobb was a very professional player. He had 9 different types of slides. He was one of the first very professional baseball players who took it as a profession. Even though in those days you had to get another job. You could be a very patriotic baseball player, but you had to get a job in the off season to support your family. You couldn't just play baseball or football. So today, you're right. You still have to be a great player, but today you are really, really, really rewarded financially for that. In a way that Ty Cobb and that generation was not. And so I just wonder what that generation of baseball and football players would say about this generation doing that. I just wonder about that, Hal.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned Ty Cobb. We reversed it a little bit. I'm familiar with that book, and I'm tempted to get a copy of it. It was written by a liberal fellow, too. And there was a couple of books. Ty Cobb had a autobiography. He had some help with a guy named Stump. I think of his first name. And he hired him, and it was My Life in Baseball. And then Cobb died in 1961, I think, and Stump wrote a book that was very nasty. And some of the stories about him are untrue. And nobody knows that he was a World War I veteran. When a lot of the players at that time were considered shirkers because they weren't going into the war, he went in and he took the most hazardous job. That was chemical warfare. And he actually saw a little action. He had some gunfire exchange. He went in, towards the end, but he had no idea when the war was going to end. And here was a guy that was supposed to be this evil racist that went around when he wasn't spiking people, he was beating up blacks and murdering them. Well, the guy played in the majors for over 20 years, 24, 25 years. He was a player manager. If he was such an evil screwball, you think someone would have stopped him some point along the line.
Well, the racism is just like today. The racism was not true. He was actually the opposite of that. Ty came from a family in the South that was opposed to slavery always. His great-grandfather was a preacher. Now, when the Negro American League, which I actually have a baseball from my grandfather. My grandfather wasn't black. He didn't play in the league, but I just happened to have one of the baseballs. Ty Cobb supported that. He helped to get going. And then when they started to have, Jackie Robinson come into, there was a big controversy of blacks coming in to be able to play in the major leagues. And you know what Ty Cobb said? If they're good enough, let them play. So Ty Cobb really supported the black baseball players. Like you said, he was a great patriot. And, wow, you think about a guy like that and the heart that he had for his country and for the game and just like what we saw over the weekend, and you wonder what this country has come to.
That's right. Yeah, so, and it really is this cultural Marxism. And I sort of like to point out a few things about Karl Marx, and I think it's important. His Communist Manifesto, according to Dr. Duke Pesta, and I don't disagree, is the most read document or book in colleges today. And the 10 planks of the manifesto are, of course, the economic solution to the free market. And he also said that communism abolishes eternal truths. Well, anything that abolishes eternal truths is evil. It's inherently evil. And Karl Marx there is some evidence that he may have been a Luciferian devil worshiper. There was a book called Marx and Satan, written by Pastor Richard Rumbrand. But at the very least, we know that he was a racist. He used to refer to people he didn't like as Jews with Negro blood. He was an anti-Semite. And we'll say, well, he was Jewish. Well, he was Jewish. He was from a Jewish background, but he rejected the faith of his fathers.
Right.
And there's some belief that he may have actually been a Christian for a short time. But he obviously rejected that, too. And he wrote a book called A World Without Jews. And I have a copy of the book. In fact, I think I have a copy on my Amazon, trying to sell a copy. So most people have no idea. The manifesto, and he's going to liberate the downtrodden. Let
me speak for a moment on that. You spoke about truth, and of course, it's interesting that Harvard here in Puritan New England was founded with the motto Veritas Christo et Ecclesiae, which means the truth for Christ and His church. We are setting up this fine institution to make sure that each succeeding generation knows the truth of Jesus Christ. That's the bottom line. Never mind, they won't let the Christian flag be flown above Boston City Hall Plaza, a fight that we're fighting. But so then you forward until like the mid-1800s at Harvard. Okay, 1844, as we know from our friend Sam Blumenfeld, the Unitarians took over, and then the Christ, they changed the motto just to Veritas. They took Christ out of the motto. And who was attending school at that time? None other than John Adams' great-grandson, who was the grandson of John Quincy and the son of Charles Francis, who was our Civil War ambassador to the court of St. James in Britain. So he went there, and he, in his diary, he talks about that. He doesn't mention Christ at all at Harvard, but he talks about the new craze for two guys, and they were Karl Marx, and the other one was Darwin. So Marx and Darwin coming in, they have, okay, you get rid of Christ, you have to fill it up with something. You know, you get rid of that truth. Whose truth are you going to bring in? Marx, who just, like you said he's anti-truth, and Darwin. And so that's kind of where New England has been on this track since that time. Not all of us, thank God, but, you know, Harvard University, which sets the standard for all the others, took on Marx and Darwin, and it's been downhill since that time.
That's right. That's right. So actually, I'm sort of amazed that we still have the amount of patriot and freedom-loving people we still do. After 4 generations maybe have been taught to brought up on this political correctness. They didn't use that term then, cultural Marxism. So getting back to the football issue here, these people, again, the issue isn't whether or not they have the right to free speech. That when the game's over, they want to go out and they can campaign for whomever they like. They can join whatever cause they like. But they're using the fact that they're athletes. They're using this national spotlight basically to slap. It's not against Trump. It's against the country and what it stands for. That's how I take it.
Right.
And again, this is you can only have that amount of. The NFL is a multi-billion-dollar entity, and only in a free country where there is excess. I mean, if I have to work, just to pay the rent and survive, I don't have time to. I can't afford to buy a ticket or even buy the cable, the TV package to get the football game. You see, but in a country that we enjoy because of the freedoms and the prosperity, we can enjoy. We can have things like Hollywood. We can have things like professional sports where athletes can make lots of money. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Even the ones who don't make money do pretty well for themselves, and that's because of what we enjoy. You don't see the NFL going into Haiti, do you? You don't see the NFL going into Cuba. You don't see the NFL going into some of these other countries that are pretty where the economy is about tanked. So what is it they're trying to say? Is saying that this country is so evil, inherently evil? And what are they doing about the problems in the inner city? They're so self-righteous and all about the systemic racism. Well, what about the murders in Chicago, the inner city, every single day? What are they doing about that? What are they doing about the single-family problem in the inner city? 80%. I mean, it's a problem everywhere, but 80%. That's pretty bad. Are they Are they doing anything to stop that? Are they actually? Do they set up food kitchens and food pantries to? And I know some of them do. Sometimes they cut a check to an organization. That's sort of the extent of it. But,
right.
I get into the inner city. I don't see all these athletes, walking around trying to help people. So most of the times they say, "Hey, I want nothing to do with the inner city. I'm out of the ghetto. I'm out of the hood. I have no obligation, to it anymore."
Right.
So to me, they're just a lot of self-righteous. They're not. Most of them are not Christian people. And even when they do stand, Tom, you see the camera panning. They're sort of like totally disinterested. Now, I don't know when they started playing the national anthem at sporting events. It was probably around World War I. It's a tradition that they have, and they established it. And when you signed up, you knew that you'd have to stand up, at least be quiet for a few minutes while they sing the national anthem. The jets fly over, or what have you, or there might be some ceremony on the field. That's just part of the ritual, or the custom. That's just the way it is, like it or not.
Right.
So if they don't like it, get out of there. Start their own league. You call it the Marxist League. Let them start their own league if they don't like it. But when you got people like Roger Goodell. He's a liberal. And so was Kraft. Kraft is, and it's interesting. You mentioned the flag issue. What about not one player on the Patriots? I'm sure some of them read that article, saw it in the Herald. It was on the front page, heard about it. Not one of them said, hey, Hal, we'll support you. You know, this is wrong. You have every right to freedom of expression. We did that. We took a kneel, and we're getting into some trouble. And we'll be there. We're going to call the mayor. We know the mayor. You know, we're going to say, hey, this is wrong. No, none of them. Not one of them.
Say, I'm going to stand. I don't know about Bob Kraft, but I do know that I was present for the Trump's final rally before Election Day, and he read in New Hampshire, Manchester, New Hampshire, he read a letter by Bob Kraft. He wanted to read a former letter that Bob Kraft had written, but Bob Kraft said, no, let me write a more powerful, Bill Belichick. So he read a letter by Bill Belichick, which unequivocally supported Trump and liberty in general. And Bob Kraft, in every Super Bowl that he's won, he has spoken of American liberty and what the meaning of the word patriot is. So you're right. By and large, Goodell, oh my goodness, don't get me started on him. I have to say the Patriots organization, they have done a little bit. They have at least given lip service to the much more patriotic candidate. By the way, he spoke. Trump just spoke at the United Nations. Hell, I cannot even believe the words he spoke at the UN. I don't know if I'm in heaven right now or some parallel universe. I never thought those words, especially after Obama, would be spoken at the UN for American sovereignty, for sovereignty and nationalism in general, and just a Washingtonian view of nations getting along in self-interest. Oh, my goodness, Hal, that really blew me away. And speaking specifically in favor of our Constitution and Bill of Rights, specifically. Oh, my goodness.
Every president that I can remember going to the UN, they go with hat in hand, and they yap about a new world order and into the international community and how the America needs to. I mean, when Daddy Bush, when Obama, all of them, from Reagan probably not so much, at least verbally, but George H.W. Bush was a committed globalist.
Right.
So wasn't Clinton. So wasn't Obama, and so wasn't George W. It was so obvious, and they always went there almost like a junior partner, the UN. And I'll never forget Daddy Bush when he said, "I want congressional approval for the Gulf War, the first one." He said, "But I'm going to a higher authority." Now, he wasn't talking about the Lord God. He was talking about the UN.
And at the UN, he gave that famous speech. Now we see a new world order coming into view. You know, and
that's right. He also gave that to a joint session of Congress.
Yes.
And I'll never forget. I watched this. And behind him, and you can go to YouTube. We uploaded it on Camp Constitution's channel, but it's also just put in George Bush's New World Order speech, and he said, "What we have here is a final chance at this New World Order." And
yes,
then UN
it was
is envisioned by its founder.
almost a repetition of the UN speech, and there's an interesting. As a historian, I like to look at the interesting coincidences of history, and those that control history on the darker side. They're very into numerology, and they're very into the number of 11.
Hey, Tom, we're out of time. We only get 30 minutes, so let's wrap it up.
Okay, let me say this very, very quickly, Hal. On this day in 1789, Congress proposed a firewall to contain the new powers of the Constitution. Contrary to the popular understanding, the Bill of Rights is not addressed to the people. It is from the people to the government.
Amen. That's
telling
right.
it in uncertain terms not to go beyond the named and specific powers that we, the people, just granted to it. To further clarify this point, the bill contains its own preamble. Quote, in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of power. Further declaratory and restrictive clauses should be added. Very stringent. Congress shall make no law, shall not be infringed, shall not be violated. By comparison, the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, privileges are granted by the globalist government to the people.
Right.
What is absent? Any restraint on UN power, including the right to protest the UN itself. In fact, Article 29, Section 3 states explicitly, the rights and freedoms may in no case be exercised contrary to the purposes and principles of the United Nations.
Hey, that's right, Tom. That's right.
All
right, well,
folks, to remember today is the big difference and what we're fighting against, the United Nations.
That's right, and we'll end this show by saying we need to get out of the UN and support the current bill in Congress that will do that. So you've been listening to WBCQ The Planet, the Camp Constitution Radio, with Hal Shurtleff and my co-host, Tom Tricorner Hat Moore. Until next week, God bless you, and take care.
God bless America.